What's up, y'all? It is Cody from the Keepers of Nerddom. How you doing? Tonight, I wanted to talk with you about one of the most interesting units in the Necron Codex now, because it used to not be, and it is something that I wanted to give a little bit of battle report as well. It is none other than one of our Titanic models, known as the Monolith. I had cobbled together from my kids' Legos a mock-up to use as a proxy. So please don't laugh too hard because it's terrible, but it's intentionally just to get on the board to give an example of the monolith. I'll try to zoom out just a bit here. So this is the monolith that I built. It is pure silly in all of its glory. I'm not going to say it's good because it's not. It is the most rough approximation you will ever see in your life. It is meant to just be, hey, here's a box on the table, and that's what it was used for. And it was really just so that way they would see some sort of representation, because let's be honest, this is a model that the actual in-game model costs over 140 bucks. Brand spanking new, and there's the actual thing that it's designed off of. As you can tell very clearly, not a very good representation of it. But the reason I wanted to see it was because this is something that needs to be just tested out, because the monolith has gone from, you know what, it exists, it's in our codex, to now that's interesting. I wonder what we should do with that. In the new Arcs of Omen detachment stuff and the new rules, it seems like they have done some interesting things, because Necron's got very few point changes, but where they got them was in very interesting spots, and one of those point changes was monoliths. So this monolith model it's just a beautiful model in general anyway, and so I'm hoping someday to have one in some form or another, maybe even just 3D printed, other than the Legos, because the Lego is just a stand-in until needed, right? So let's go into the codex to see, what this thing used to cost versus what it does today. So the monolith, let's go all the way to the back first and foremost, and then we'll talk through what it costs now. So monolith is right here, as you can see. It is, according to this chart, 360 points with 5 points extra for death rays. So a long while back, I think almost 8 months or so ago, at least, it dropped from 360 down to 300. And still, from what I could tell, nobody was really taking it. And then this new detachment stuff happened where the Arcs of Omen detachment, let's see if I actually printed that out. I believe I did. Yeah, there we go. So Arcs of Omen detachment, you have to take an HQ and at least 3 of one of these categories. And, oh, look at that. A Lord of War. And a Lord of War would also be the monolith. And so the monolith now can fit into a normal detachment with everything else, this Arcs of Omen detachment. And then after that, you can have different options. So if you take 3 troops, you can have any of these other things down here. And as everything we can tell, it's if you take 3 elites, you can still have 3 more elites. But if you don't take the elites to be your compulsory units, because down here is the just understood compulsory versus optional, then I believe you can take another 3 elites. Let me know down in the comments below if something is different on that. Like if you already take 3 fast attack, you can't take another 3. Let me know, because I'm reading it as such that you can have up to 6 fast attack units in this, and then that's it. Like that's your max. But that's a lot, because that could give a lot of options for a lot of builds. But this is a really big change for things. So not only was this 360, it went down to 300, and then during the Arcs of Omen detachment time frame and the points adjustments, it went down, and I will pull out that paper as well, because this is crazy. This boggled my brain. I had to print it off and highlight anything and everything that changed drastically. And so we got Necron Warriors, we got our death marks, what we do on the death marks, but we'll see maybe someday. Tomb Blades, Shark Praetorians, Ghost Arc, Doomsday Arc, and Obelisk, Tesseract Vault, Converged Civilian, and then up here, the Lords of War, the Monolith, went down another 30 points. And something is interesting, because if a weapon is not mentioned on here, so for example, the Tomb Blades right here, they have their Twin Gauss Blasters and 10 Tesla Carbines. They still cost points. So they're printed on here. And people started noticing the Monolith's death rays are gone. So all of a sudden, that 5 points is gone, but it wasn't actually just 5 points. Not only did this drop 30, it actually dropped 50. And this is where it's really interesting with all the new points drops with a lot of the oh my goodness, Space Marines. They got their free equipment, which is really interesting because that's a lot of points costs that are just gone. So it's not a direct points cost drop. It's a drop in a roundabout way, because then they can just equip these for free, which they normally would either not take them because they're too costly, or take them and take up points and therefore not be able to field other stuff. So it was a points decrease in a roundabout way, and this is too, because it's actually 20 extra points off. So this thing actually dropped in a way 50 points, 30 actually right off the top, and then 50 total when you see why. So first off, the Monolith is a Titanic. Let's look down here. It's a vehicle, Titanic, the Monolith, Necrons, and it can be a dynasty, and I believe now it is core as well, because it is not a character. So it gets core, which is really interesting. I'll have to check on that for sure on this one, but at the very least, it's dynasty, so you can become Mefrit and Nihilak, Novak. Pretty crazy. So let's go through its profiles here really quickly. So Monolith has a total of, first off, 24 wounds. So this is a big boy. The only thing you'll notice though is it actually isn't great as far as survivability, but there's some ways around that. So 8 movement, 6-inch movement, 4-inch movement, depending on how many wounds are remaining. It always starts with a weapon skill of 6+ to hit, which sounds terrible until you realize something down here in the weapons profile. Ballistic skill is hits on a 3-up, 4-up, 5-up. Cool. So 3-ups, 2-ups is like the god tier, obviously, but we don't have that here. So it's always a strength 8, toughness 8. Great, cool. 24 wounds, 6 attacks when it still is at its top profile of 13+ wounds remaining, D6 worth of attacks, and then a D3 towards the end. A leadership of 10, which doesn't matter because it's its own unit. And then the save is 2+. Now, here's where things get interesting. Normally, the death rays had cost 5 points each, because this model is equipped with 4 Gauss Flux Arcs, a Particle Whip, and a Portal of Exile. So it has 6 weapons total. So normally it is equipped with a Gauss Flux Arc, but it's 4 of them. So if you change these out, because this model's 4 Gauss Flux Arcs can be replaced with 4 death rays. So you'd have to pay 5 points per death ray. That's 20 points if you wanted to change over to those. So the Gauss Flux Arc has a 30-inch range, rapid fire 3, strength 5, so not very strong at all. AP -2, damage 1. This is very much a Gauss weapon that just shoots down infantry. And all of a sudden, the reality hits that we can go to death rays, which their range is shorter, but if you're in Mefrit, you can increase to 27. And it's a heavy one, so it's not just one shot, because you get 4 death rays. It's 4 shots at strength 9, which usually beats or at least equals vehicles' toughness. AP -3, that extra AP, and especially if you're in Mefrit, that could be AP -4, especially with what we're going to do with this thing. And it's a D3 + 3. So guaranteed 4 damage minimum, 6 damage max per hit. If you get this thing up to a 2+ to hit, this thing is going to wreck everything. Oh, but wait, guaranteed it also has equipped with a Particle Whip, 36-inch range, which in Mefrit could be 39. Heavy D6. These are the saddest things to see. I really wish it would go to heavy 2D3s. So then it'd be a minimum of 2 to 6. This is a D6, and in the game I played with it, it had a really great shot with this, and then next turn, like 3 shots instead of, I think 5 was the first time, which 3 isn't terrible, but it's nowhere near as good as what you could, right? But this is strength 12, right? Strength 12, that is massive. And you could double a lot of things, especially if you're using this to target something small, because this is like an anti-group thing potentially, because the blast keyword makes this heavy D6 here change potentially whenever it hits certain things. Let's look at that for just a second, because that's something we didn't have to interact much with, because what he had was not very blast needed for what I was doing. So blast weapons, some weapons have blast listed in their profile abilities. Those are referred to as blast weapons. In addition to normal rules, the following rules apply to blast weapons. If it targets a unit that has between 6 and 10 models, it always makes a minimum of 3 attacks. So you don't actually have to roll the D6 entirely. You can roll it, I guess, but you always make a minimum of 3. So that's really cool if you attack something that has 6 to 10 models. So if, when determining how many attacks are made with that weapon, the dice rolled results in less than 3 attacks being made, make 3 attacks instead. Great. So there is a way to solidify that. And for example, if a grenade D6 weapon with the blast roll targets a unit that has 6 or more, and you roll a 2, you get to do at least 3. And when a blast weapon target's unit has 11 or more models, do not roll dice to just randomly determine how many attacks are made. Instead, make the maximum number. So you could use this if need be, which typically you're not using the particle whip to attack big groups like this, but it's an interesting option to do because, you know, Space Marines do have multiple wounds on them. So even if it's just 2 wounds, but, you know, again, like Adeptus Custodes, you may not get to hit them at 11 models in a unit, but you could get a guaranteed 3. It's kind of interesting to note. Blast weapons can never be used to make attacks against a unit that is within engagement range of the firing model's unit, even if the weapon has the pistol type or if the firing model is a vehicle or a monster. Firing high explosives at point-blank range is simply unwise. So as a vehicle, you can shoot into close combat because big guns never tire. This is something else we just need to understand with the Monolith. It can make attacks with ranged weapons even when its unit is within engagement range. But what's also interesting is that vehicles can... Oh, that's funny. So they have to subtract 1 from the hit rolls when resolving weapons within engagement range, but they can fall back as a vehicle, or a Titanic, I believe. Yeah, it's Titanics can just fall back and suffer no penalty, which is kind of interesting. So they don't actually have to stay in that, but they can if they want to. So we come back to the Monolith, right? The particle whip is really cool. It's pretty devastatingly interesting because the blast keyword at least gets you to an option of at least 3 shots when you roll if you target something with at least 6 units. Kind of interesting. The Portal of Exile, though, melee. This is its melee. So when it's at top, it gets 6 attacks with this, minus 3 AP. The strength is user, so 8, not bad. 3 damage, and each time an attack is made with this weapon, the attack auto hits. So hold up. This thing has a weapon skill all the way down of 6+. But wait a second, that doesn't matter because this auto hits. Still has to roll the wound roll, but it auto hits. So that means all 6 of your shots, like all 6 of your fights in melee, guaranteed hits, and then you find out if you wound with a minus 3 AP. Imagine using that with Novak, right? That this is deadly. This is very deadly. It's kind of a weird model because it does everything really pretty well as far as offensively that it has access to. So living metal, so it heals 1 every turn. Command protocols, so it gains access to those, which is really sweet. Death descending. During deployment, you can set up this model in the upper atmosphere instead of placing it on the battlefield. If you do, then during the reinforcement steps of one of your movement phases, you can set up this unit anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches away from any enemy models. So you can't do this on turn 1 because of other restrictions in the rules, but after that, it's fair game. That's fascinating, and we'll talk a little further about that in just a second. Let's go through the rest here. Hovering. Distances are measured to and from either this model's hull or its base, whichever is the closest, which its hull will be the closest on my Lego model, that's for sure. Explodes. When this model is destroyed, will 1d6 before removing it from play. On a 6, it explodes, and each unit suffers within 6 inches suffers d6 mortal wounds. Fantastic little extra thing, but it also can hurt you too. Eternity Gate. Here's where things get weird. In your movement phase, if this model remains stationary, then in the reinforcement step of that phase, it can summon, so you're still in the movement phase, it can summon a unit. If it does, select 1 Dynasty Core infantry unit from your army that is in strategic reserves, set up that unit anywhere on the battlefield that is it is wholly within 3 inches of the model and not within engagement range of any enemy models. Models and units that are set up using this ability count as having moved a distance in inches equal to their move characteristic in the movement phase. Now, what this means is, as long as this thing hasn't moved, you can essentially use it as a transport of things that are in strategic reserves that can spawn near it and break the 9 inches away rule. So say something got close, didn't make a charge, or did make a charge into them, it could summon. The Monolith can actually summon stuff next to it because it just needs to be within 3 inches. So you could summon them behind the Monolith, and then charge right into them, with an inch range, right? Really easy, which is so cool. Think about that. The Monolith has the ability to summon its own help. And so here's the deal. You can't use Eternity Gate with Death Descending, okay? So just keep that in mind. That's the first thing. You can't use them immediately. You can't drop down on turn 2 and then Eternity Gate because you just moved. So you can't actually do this, all right? But here's where it gets interesting, right? So the Monolith itself can fight pretty stinking well. Like it's really good. I'm curious about something. I'm guessing that is infantry. That's weird. I wasn't even looking for that. The Locusts, heavy destroyers, which means the Locust destroyers are infantry as well. That's bizarre. Core infantry, dynasty core infantry, and everything's core now almost. So this gives you so many weird options. Canoptic wraiths, unfortunately, yeah, I was afraid of that. They are not infantry. So Triarch Praetorians, they're infantry. Ophidian destroyers, they're infantry. That's interesting. They don't fly though. Huh. Weird. Very weird. Interesting. Tomb Blades are not infantry. Just interesting the things that you could summon potentially with that. Because I was thinking of a certain play style, but obviously that's not going to work. But at the very least, the Lich Guard are possibilities, which I think I've got a full-on thought for this. Because see, they're infantry and core already even in the book back then. And so... oh, this is cool. So let's go to the stratagems for a second, because this thing obviously has some interesting play style going on here. And the stratagems are fascinating for it because you could do so many weird things with this bad dog, right? Oh, that's cool. So you can make Lich Guards even more attacks, which is pretty cool. They have to be within 3 inches of a friendly Dynasty Noble model. Man, where is it? I apologize. I want to find this for you because, okay. So first off, we can do, that's a good stratagem to use. Stellar Alignment Protocol. Use this stratagem in the command phase. Select one Necron's vehicle model from your army that has a wounds characteristics of 10 or more. So obviously this counts. And I've got all these yellow things in here, just sticky notes so I can find the things I really want to use. They're more useful typically to the units that I build, or the detachment I build. This model is considered to have its, until the next start of your next command phase, that model is considered to have its full wounds remaining for the purpose of determining what characteristics on its profile to use. If that model has the Titanic keyword, the stratagem costs 2 CP, otherwise it costs 1. So this does cost 2 CP for the Monolith, but you can get it back to essentially full health for shooting and melee, which is really cool. That's, that's useful, right? Here's one. Let's see what this is. Prismatic Dimensional Breach. This is the one. Use this stratagem in the reinforcement step of your movement phase. Select one Dynasty core unit from your army that is in strategic reserves. That's core. Just core. And then select one friendly Dynasty Night Scythe or Dynasty Monolith model that is on the battlefield. Set that core unit up anywhere on the battlefield that is wholly within 3 inches of the Night Scythe or Monolith model and not within engagement range of any enemy units. This stratagem cannot be used in the first battle round. So on turn 2, you can drop the Monolith, and you can't necessarily use its own ability to spawn someone next to it from strategic reserves. However, you could use this right here, and all of a sudden, if memory serves, the Canoptic Wraiths are now core 2. So they also, do they have the fly keyword? Let's find out. This is where things get crazy. They don't fly. Well, that's unfortunate. So they don't fly. The reason I'm saying that is just because there's a lot of things that I've found with stratagems that can limit your charge movement because of flight. The one interesting thing is if you play Novak, you can get a +1 inch to your charge range, and that, that matters. And especially with something like this, you could set them up within, first off, the Monolith has to spawn at least 9 inches away. They have to be within 3 inches of the model, which would give them another 3 inches essentially to get closer. So it'd be a 6-inch charge. If you're Novak, that's only a 5-inch charge. It's not very much, right? That's crazy what you could do there. So this thing has an interesting ability. So let me throw this out at you too. Another thought. You use this on turn 2 with it and spend that CP and spawn like a Canoptic Wraith and they charge. And then you can charge with the Monolith if you want to or not, but it's going to be a hard charge, right? The real thing is you're spawning them to take hits and also shield it from charges, right? But if they make it into the charge, then cool, they get to do crazy damage and wreck something too. That's awesome. But then on turn 3, you can actually spawn, say, a whole nother set of Lich Guard, right? Because stuff's probably going to be trying to move up to it to get to it. So you could spawn Lich Guard and then make that charge really easily. Kind of crazy. Or what if you just put an entire squad of 20 Necron Warriors in a strategic reserve and did it? Because now that's free. It's free CPs to put them in strategic reserve and just spawn a Necron Warrior blob right in front of your Monolith just to take hits for it. Because I'd much rather a Necron Warrior blob go down and at the very least get to shoot that turn. I mean, it's going to cost a lot of CP to do all this crazy weird shenanigans with that, but it'd be crazy cool to see what you could do with that. So, oh man. Curse of the Pharaon. Use a stratagem in any phase when a Necron's vehicle model from your army is destroyed. Do not roll to see if that model explodes. It does so automatically. If that model has a Titanic keyword, the stratagem costs 3 CP. Otherwise, it costs 1. So if you use that on a Monolith, that is expensive. So just keep that in mind. You got to be careful with that. Doom Scythe. That doesn't do anything for this. Necron's Core. Add 1 to the strength characteristics of models in that unit. That doesn't really help us at all. Other than my melee Portal of Exile, I guess. Okay. Malevolent Arcing doesn't help. Whirling Onslaught. Nope. There's just small things like this. Solar Pulse you could obviously use to just make them not have light cover benefit. That's useful. Or cover in general. So yeah, those are things that you could do. The interesting stratagems, Mephrit's not a good one to use on it because you're fishing for those 6s. So that's not necessarily good for it. Nephric, excluding vehicle or monster units. So it just doesn't work on vehicles. It's funny. Nihilic, infantry only. Doesn't really help there. Novak. Fight phase. When a Novak unit from your army is selected to fight until the end of the phase, add 1 of the attack's characteristics. Not really that useful on it. So most of these aren't really good for the Monolith. Is for the things that it's carrying, which is interesting. Or really not even carrying. That's what's funny. They're in strategic reserve, so you could just pop them down somewhere else if you needed to. That's what's fun about the Monolith. It's really bizarre. Like, it all of a sudden went from, that's 300 points plus 20 for death rays to make it actually anti-vehicle. So 320 points down to 270 flat. And that's a big jump, like 50 points less. And it was 360 when it first started, and then 380 with the 20 extra points for the death rays. This is a big drop. So it went from 380 with death rays down to 270. 110 point drop if you're going to equip the death rays. That's insane. That's really crazy. And I guess, that could actually work there. So you could actually try to deny a psychic power. It's just a 50-50 shot, though. Not really that good of a thing. But really the other thing is just, which obviously these dynasties here don't matter as much now, but we do have Mephrit, so 3 inches to your range, which is always good because then you can get within half and get AP up by 1 pretty easily, especially when you just spawn 9 inches away. Easy money there. So just better stuff there. That's really good. Nephric, 6 up invuln save. That actually could be really useful on it, just to give it something in case a really high AP something hits it. The advance doesn't really help. That doesn't help either. Cool. Novak, 1 to the charge rolls, which could help the Monolith as well, but really it's the things in front of it as well you could really use. Melee attacks, if it charged moved, improve the AP by 1. That's big, actually. And it's going to help the things that pop out of him as well. And then you get access to the protocol of the Hungry Void. There's some cool stuff here. Obsec, imagine having an Obsec Monolith. It's just kind of funny because you could just swallow the entirety of the point. AP, yeah, that doesn't really help unless you're sitting in the back. And Eternal Guardian's okay. Caesarican, let's see. Loses a wound as a result of a mortal wound. This could be really useful, actually. War 1d6 is this anti-psychic on a 5+. That wound is not lost because this thing's going to be a big target. Now, granted, you could spawn stuff from it, so that's helpful. and then you can reroll one wound roll and making that unit's attacks. That's actually really useful in the Monolith. And then Undying Legions makes it heal a little faster, 2 instead of 1. Pretty cool. And Sawtech right here, the morale test is completely useless on it. They make double the number of attacks if the shooting model's target is within 18 inches. You're not going to be using the rapid fire if you're going for the heavier build because you've got a lot of smaller weapons fire. So really Sawtech is useless here. So yeah, I mean, honestly, the Caesarican is really good if you're fighting something that is crazy amounts of psychic. Novak is great for if you're making a charge build there, and Mefrit's great for the ranged attack stuff. Obviously, you've got the 6-up invuln save is the only thing here, but then OPSEC is really just good for your army in general. But also, the Monolith could actually swallow a point. And that's kind of funny to think about, that you could just keep them off of it by just sheer force of the fact that you're that big. Obviously, I think my model is a little bit bigger than what it's supposed to be. But this is the idea, right? There are so many shenanigans you can pull now because Arcs of Omen Detachment made it way easier. It doesn't cost extra CP to put a Monolith in. And now you've got a unit that can support this thing, and it's cheaper, and you could put in strategic reserve for free, something to poop out of it, and all of a sudden you've got crazy army, not necessarily on a point because they probably have the point, but you can charge into the point right after you've shot some of it. Now the one thing is if you shoot them, they may move further away from you, so that's the one caveat to this. But if it's a point, they may try to stay on the point. And so that's an interesting, check and balance, if you will. So the Monolith is fascinating, and now it's cool. Like, it kind of excites me to see this because this is now viable when it kind of wasn't for a long time. And now I'm going, I want to 3D print one. I want to get one, something. Because this is not it, right? This was me scrounging through my kids' Legos going, I'm going to build something to put on the field to at least go, hey, this is what this is, So it's got the energy orb up here and it's got the things up the top. So it is very, very redneck, low-key, silly, but it's just put it on the field, make something present there, and that's it. And, for that it worked. The game that we had with it was really just a small game of Tyranids versus my Necrons, and I used this thing. I didn't spawn anything from it because the person I was playing was newer and still getting introduced to stuff like stratagems and whatnot, so we were just introducing a few of those things. So I didn't get to try a lot of my shenanigans here. But this thing hit like a truck. It was awesome. The melee it did, it did like 9 damage to a swarm tyrant, or a hive tyrant. Swarm lord. The named hive tyrant or whatever. And then the hive tyrant did in melee 15, 18 damage. It was something silly, and it had done previously, because of its psychic abilities, 4 or 5 damage to it. And so then on his turn, he did another psychic thing, and instantly, and the psychic stuff killed it. Kind of expected it, but then I went to roll to see if it exploded, and I rolled a 6. And so then within 6 inches was his, because I'd already killed the things guarding his Swarm Lord. His Swarm Lord was right beside me. His Hormagaunts, or whatever the little melee faction stuff troops for him were nearby, and my Necron Warriors were nearby. And I rolled the d6 to see how many mortal wounds each of those got, and I rolled a 5. And so I actually killed the Swarm Lord, because he was already damaged from my 9 damage, and killed him. Killed 5 of his little Hormagaunts or whatever, which had already been hurt in their group. And so then he actually had to make a morale test at the end of his turn because he shot and killed this, and it blew up. And then I lost 5 Necron Warriors, which was like, you know what? With what just happened, don't even care. It was really cool because I still had my, I think I still had like 7 or 8 Necron Warriors by the end and a Royal Warden, so I couldn't complain. So the reality was, this performed admirably the first time out, and I just broke something off of it. That's funny. So yeah, this is a neat model that has some crazy epic potential, right? And I really just want to let you guys know that this is there, and people online have been already talking about it, and rightfully so, because it's a crazy model that has some crazy shenanigans that it's going to pull out of nowhere and freak everybody out. So it's going to be a great play, and I'm like breaking everything off of this thing. So let me know down in the comments below, what do you think of the Monolith as it stands now? Is it viable? Is it something you think is top tier? I think it has the ability to provide something fascinating to Necrons that they haven't had in a great way other than like Veil of Darkness. And that's a massive presence just out of nowhere that can't get shot off the table because it's not present on the table on turn one. Right, that to me is a big reality. That's a big win. So let me know down in the comments below what you think of the new Monolith, and you know, the points changes. How much has it impacted you and your play style? And I just broke that whole thing apart. I'm Cody from the Keepers of Nerddom. Take care. Bye.